Operation Encore is a 501c nonprofit that is helping veterans turn into rock stars every single day. You can learn more about what Operation Encore is doing by going over to their website at www.operationencore.org. That is www.operationencore.org. If you can give them a hand, just click that little donate button or follow all of their social medias and learn exactly what they are doing to change the lives of our veterans every single day. Hey, welcome everybody to Drunk Dudes in a Gun Room. Man, I know we've kind of been away from the military scene for a minute, and we're going to pull ourselves back to a video that I think is going to help out a lot of people. Everybody's got questions about this topic, so let's dig in. We're going to have John Berry. John Berry is an Army veteran, distinguished trial lawyer, and the CEO of Berry Law, a firm dedicated to veteran advocacy, recovering over $350 million in back pay awards through its veteran disability practice and achieving multiple accolades for its commitment to hire, retain, promote, and support veterans. Let's bring on John Berry.
Hey, Don, thanks so much for having me.
Hey, man, I have been excited about this ever since we got the date and the time situated. So why don't we give everybody a quick overview? Tell them kind of what brought you into the military and where you grew up and that type of stuff.
Sure. So it comes back to my father is a Vietnam veteran and also an attorney. And he had a famous case. It was called the Green Beret Affair, where he defended several members of the 5th Special Forces who were charged with murder, killing a double agent in Vietnam. And so growing up, my dad was a well-known lawyer. He started off as an infantry officer and then became a JAG officer in Vietnam. Similarly, I started off as an infantry officer, then was logistics, never a JAG officer. But my story was when I was 16 years old, I went to a school in Roswell, New Mexico called New Mexico Military Institute. At the time, I thought I wanted to play football at West Point. But after 2 years of high school in a military school, there was no way I was going to a military academy. I was a decent football player at the time, at least in high school. And I wanted to keep playing. I wasn't big enough or fast enough to play for Nebraska at the time. And so I was looking at Division I AA or FCS schools. And I had a cousin who was a naval officer at Norfolk. He's like, dude, you got to check out William & Mary. He's like, it's great academics. Their football is good. Back then, they were the Division I AA, actually played in a real tournament of 16 teams at the end of the season. He's like, they're in the tournament every year. And it's like over 60% female. So, and I was coming from a military school, right? So I'm like, yeah, like, all right, like this sounds great. And I visited the campus, met the coaches. It was beautiful. And so I ended up going to William & Mary. I rode the bench for a couple of years and I sucked and I got injured. And then, at the end of my sophomore year, I realized like I was going to have to take a year off for an injury. And I just realized like, I love the game, but man, in college, it's tough. And, interesting story. I have a friend here in Nebraska who was very successful, but he played football with Pat Tillman. But also the years that I was at William & Mary, he played for the Huskers and he has 3 national championship rings. But I did play with Mike Tomlin and Sean McDermott. Tomlin's the Steelers coach, McDermott, the Bills coach. So I got, that's my, even though I rode the bench while those guys played, but I realized I wasn't going to be great. So I wanted another challenge before I went to law school. I said, I want to be an airborne ranger. I spent, the last 4 years trying to bulk up to play football. I can't imagine like not getting enough food or sleep and jumping out of airplanes. Like this sounds like really cool. So I decided to become an infantry officer so I'd get the opportunity to go to those schools and see if that was for me. And had a great time. Went to Bosnia in 99, right when we started bombing Kosovo, and thought, okay, this is going to blow up. Like we're going to, roll out the tanks, roll out the gate in our Bradleys. We were the infantry company attached to a tank task force, and we were close to the Drina River. So we were on the Serb side. So when the Kosovo blew up, I'm like, this is it. And then when it didn't happen, as a peacekeeping mission, I'm like, all right, well, we went back to, I had an opportunity to get my last year of active duty I could do in the reserve component. So I showed up and they said, yeah, we'll give you tuition assistance for law school. And that led to me being a company commander in Iraq in 2005. They made me switch from infantry to logistics. And anyway, I ended up staying in 20 years and I retired about 5 years ago as a lieutenant colonel, I ran the officer and warrant officer candidate school, which was awesome. I absolutely loved that. Even though I was an ROTC guy, OCS is way tougher. But I just a great, so a lot of military history in my family. But that's how I got involved. I kind of wanted a break between undergrad and law school, and I thought, oh wow, like jump out of airplanes, travel, cool. Like that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I probably left Bosnia right as you got there. I was there in '98, so yep, I know exactly what you was talking about with Bosnia, because it was peacekeeping, as long as you consider landmines peacekeeping.
Yeah. No, the UXO was ever. It's kind of funny. Like back then, because I was with First Cap. Who were you with in Bosnia?
I was with 1st Armored Division.
Okay, and then after us, I think it was 10th Mountain. But so the interesting thing was, going into well, fuck. Now I lost my train of thought, so it doesn't matter anyway. But but no, I went in thinking, I'm an infantry guy, and this is what I'm going to do. And then now I went, and we made fun of the National Guard guys and the logistics guys, like the REMPs. Remember REMP? Like, hey, you rear echelon motherfucker, you're not doing anything. Yep. And the reserve component, we made fun of those guys. Yep. And then there I am in 2005, and I'm like, oh well, now I'm a company commander, and I'm a National Guard unit on a Marine base. And so it's a little bit different scenario, and I had to give my blue cord back, and I wasn't infantry, so it was, but it was yeah.
They let you keep that, even though you were prior infantry, they took that from you, huh?
Yeah, no, you can't wear it unless there's the regulation. So that if you're not in an infantry unit, nope, you can't wear it. So the source of pride was taken away, but you served in any way that you can, and it was still a great experience, and I really learned a lot. But the funny thing was, when I came off active duty, I went to a CAV unit in the Guard before they made me switch to logistics, and infantry guy in CAV unit, no big deal. And I went to this range, my first drill, and I went to this range briefing. And like, all right, and I want to make sure that nobody cracks their first beer till the last guy's off the range, and Alpha Company's selling beers out of their pickup truck for $1 a beer tonight. I want to make sure everybody's back in the barracks by 2 a.m. so we can. And I was like, what? Like, coming from active duty, it was different. But then, with 9/11, it all changed. By the time I deployed in 2005, I think the reserve component was very close to, if not on par with the active duty units, just because of all of a sudden training was serious. And so, there was a huge paradigm shift from the reserve component being the guys that kind of hung out and drank on the weekends to being the guys that were getting deployed right alongside their active duty brethren.
Yeah. I think when 9/11, because I do remember there were some California National Guard guys there. And I can't remember what unit. The California National Guard guys was like civilians at war. There was no military in them, but they were really cool to talk to. But then we seen this reserve unit that came on, and man, we had to laugh because they were all like overweight and exactly what you picture the reserve and National Guard components to be. But everybody had like knives strapped to them, and everything else. It was like they walked out of the PX as Rangers, And so we all joked with them. But yeah, by the time 9/11 happened and everything else, I really do think that was a huge improvement to that category of our military, because now the training was serious, and that old saying of 2 weeks, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year was out the window, because most of those units were no longer, they were all deploying, even if it was deploying in the United States to take over a base. While I was with the 160th, we had the Iowa National Guard came in and ran our base because we had nobody left. Everybody else was in 4 other theaters, so I think they were all awoken to the pace. I think we all kind of got a piece of that.
Yeah, and I would tell you that the other thing is the national sentiment changed to where I had a bunch, as a company commander, I had junior enlisted soldiers with PhDs, master's degrees that, didn't need to be there, but they were volunteering. And some of them, they got the tuition forgiveness, they got their tuition paid off. But for a lot of them, they went through college, they got their degree, and okay, now it's time to go to war. And they were all there voluntarily. And it was just different than the 90s where, there was the drawdown and the military wasn't recruiting as heavily. And so we got a lot of individuals that it was either fast food or military. But, by the time after 9/11, we got some brilliant young men and women, and some even older men and women. I can remember one time I showed up at drill and I got this Spec 4 who's got CIB, Halo, airborne air assault. And he was a former special forces guy that didn't get his 20 years in. He was an officer. He never got his company command. And I think they booted him after like 16 years because he never had company command. And he was an officer, all the way through. And so he was with a 3-letter agency, and he said, "Hey, I just want to get my retirement, so I'm going to be a specialist here for my next 4 years." It was crazy, but stuff like that happened, post 9/11.
Yeah, and the stories that he could probably tell, as an E4, it's a different world. You do see a lot of, it's hard to get promoted, for one, and that was my wake up call when we had the Iowa National Guard, and we had a lot of people that own their own businesses. Most of them were owned trucking companies of some sort. And they went from driving their trucks to having to pay somebody to drive their trucks, and then also paying for the repairs and everything. Oh, and by the way, now they're getting paid E4 pay because there is no company or employer that's paying them. They were their own. So, and I never heard them once complain about the pay loss, the pay difference, the problems at home. Not one time. So I do believe that you get a more sincere group of people at that point.
Yeah. And, I think that's also where the opportunity was, though, for a lot of us. When I left, my regret is that we downsized the firm. My father, the founder, he was, on the verge of retirement. And now I'm deploying as a company commander. So, I'm going to be gone for 18 months. But when you talk about the train up and everything that's going to be associated with it. And so we downsized. That was a mistake. But the big lesson learned was that, my dad used to always say, you never get rich off your own time. We'll build a team. I mean, in the military, you learn about leadership. You learn how to lead a team. And so it's kind of like the skills are there, right? And that's the whole concept behind veteran led. It's like, wait a minute, if you served one enlistment, right, you have the basic leadership skills that your civilian counterparts will never have. So, for me, losing money and trying to rebuild coming back to rebuild the business, it was tough because I came back and, my daughter was 4 months old when I left, and my wife's been raising this child on her own, and I come back, and then I'm still working 70, 80 hours a week trying to build the business back up, right? So it's like, wait a minute, you were gone. Why aren't you spending time with me? Don't you want to be with me? And it was like, well, no. Now I've been away. I got to get everything back together. So it was a struggle, and I struggled for a while. It was tough.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I don't. Especially our younger soldiers, our younger active soldiers, they don't never think about that. When they're talking their jokes and everything else. And I didn't either until I worked with them, but it's extremely overlooked about what's lost, regardless of whether you're still in the States and you're just deploying to another unit to take over their daily ops. You're still away from your income, your business, your family, the whole 9 yards. So absolutely. What was command like when everything changed? Now you're deployed, you're in Iraq as a reservist, but as a company commander, and you've got a group of people that I'm sure in the way from the military on the civilian side, and then you're now deployed with them. What was that like as far as trying to lead?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it was even worse because I went over there as an HHC commander. So now, I was fortunate. I had three commands, right? 2 companies and one battalion command my whole career. So but it was, the level of professionalism out over there was great. I mean, the train up was tough, getting everybody. Hey, people were leaving their jobs, leaving their family. People were concerned about their employers, all the ESGR stuff, right? It was really important. We got to support the Guard and Reserve. The business owners were shutting down their businesses, but it was, hey, your country needs you, and we're going to war. And so the train up and the adjustment period was pretty tough. But then once we got in theater, it was all business, right? We're professionals, we're professional soldiers. And look, for some of us, and myself included, there was an ability to focus that I had never had before in the civilian world, where, and I've really struggled to get back to it, but hey, you show up, you do your mission, and Halliburton's taking care of your laundry, your food, You've got all these other contractors and TCNs running around doing all the minutia so that you just focus on your mission and on your team. And so what I really liked about that was I didn't have to worry about going to the grocery store and picking up food after, now I guess whatever, you get Uber Eats and the grocery stores deliver if you want. But back then it was, I had all these chores to do and things to do around the house. And I had to, with a newborn baby, and there was so much stress, and running a law firm and being a new lawyer, man, my head was ready to blow up. Right. And I went to my commander and I said, look, when I learned we were going to get deployed, is the moment I went to my commander and said, hey, look, I've been in command for a couple of years. My obligation is coming to an end, and I think I'm going to resign my commission. He said, what's the matter? And I'm like, I can't do this. I'm working, 80 hours a week. I'm in command. Like I'm struggling. I'm suffering here. And he's like, well, I got some good news for you. You don't have to worry about that anymore. You're deploying with your company to Iraq. So suck it up. Right. So it all worked out. And, but while I was over there, I really liked, all of a sudden, it was like all the things that were pulling me in different directions were gone. Right. It was just the team and the mission, and all the other stuff was taken care of. So I really enjoyed the focus, and it really reset me in a way. And as you know, deployments are not, for the civilians that may be listening to this, they think it's all action. There's a lot of sitting around in a deployment.
Are you ready to experience the power of military community right from the comfort of your living room? Introducing Military United podcast streams, now available on the Roku channel. Get ready to dive into a world of incredible stories, inspiring discussions, and the best entertainment the military community has to offer. With our veteran podcast host, you'll gain insights into the experiences that have shaped our heroes. And that's not all. We've got a lineup of talented veteran musicians playing rock, country, and more. Get ready to rock out with these incredible artists who have served our country and are now ready to entertain you with their soulful tunes. But wait, there's more. We've also got veteran comedians who will have you in stitches with their hilarious and relatable stories. Laughter is the best medicine, and these brave men and women know how to deliver it. So gather your loved ones, grab some popcorn, and prepare for an unforgettable journey into the world of military podcast, music, and comedy. With Military United podcast streams now on Roku, you can access all this incredible content with just a few clicks of a button. Military United podcast streams on Roku channel. It's time to honor, entertain, and celebrate the incredible men and women who have served our country. Join us today and experience the power of the military community.
It's not what you think. There's some excitement, but it's, there's a lot more sitting around and boredom, and keeping the soldiers, engaged so they don't do stupid things. But I really, really had a, great experience, worked with a bunch of great leaders over there. But I learned something about focus over there, where if you can just focus on the main things and cut the rest of the stuff out of your life, man, it's enjoyable. It's peaceful. And that's so ironic, right? Because there was no peace over there, but just having a team and a mission and not having to worry about everything else, there was less noise, less chatter in my life. And I felt like there was more purpose.
Yeah. And that's, I get that on my show a lot. A lot of people that come on, that, because not everybody's military or around the military that comes on. And they all say the same thing, if it was so bad over there, why do you guys say that you'd go back in a heartbeat? And I said, because life is simple. You wake up, you do your job, you stay alive, you go home, eat, sleep, wash, rinse, repeat. That's it. I said, and if something messes up in between there, it doesn't matter anymore, because at the end of the day, if you're dead, then the rest of it doesn't matter anymore. But you don't have the stress of bills and the stress of, like you said, just the little things. I got to get to the T-ball practice. I got to do all these other stuff on top of support my family and everything else. And I think every soldier got that. I don't care from what level you were, even if you were not married and you were in the barracks, it literally was down to the most simplicity of life. And it was take care of your health, do your job, go to bed, do it again tomorrow. And it doesn't get any easier than that.
Yeah. And, I think sometimes too, for the soldiers that had the best, I would say that seemed to cope the best over there, was they weren't calling home every day. They weren't Skyping every night. I mean, it seemed like the more disconnected you could be to home, the better it was. But because, I had to counsel a lot of soldiers that came. Now, look, I love my chaplains and my JAG officers, right? Because it's like, oh no, that's a legal problem. That's that you won't talk to chaplain about that, because I didn't want to solve all the problems. I found that the people who were running into the biggest issues were the ones that were Skyping home and worrying about problems at home. Like, you got to have your head in the game. Like, every day here is game day. We got to have our head on straight. Maybe calling home multiple times a day or Skyping home when you can, no, like maybe you should spend your free time at the gym or take a class or something. Cause there isn't like, there's this thought that the op tempo is going to be high and you're going to be, everybody's going to be out the gate all the time. And especially for us down that we're the logistics, the mission was different and different than what we expected. And so when that op tempo slowed down, it was like it was like, gosh, like how can we get them, engaged again? How can we ramp them up, get the adrenaline going, because they're suffering now because all they're doing is thinking about the problems at home.
Yep. Yeah. And again, you see that a lot as a leader when, if you didn't notice it before, you definitely noticed it the moment something bad happened and all the commo lines and everything got cut for a day or so that nobody could call home and talk about what happened. Those are the ones, that's when you really noticed it, because they changed because they couldn't call twice that day. And they were worried about, what is she doing at home? Who is she with? What's going on? How is she getting food? I know we don't have any money in the account, all these types of things. And they sit there and what if it? And that comes from, just like you said, early stages, not setting I had a schedule. I called my wife every Sunday and I told her if I didn't call on a Sunday, it'd be that next Monday. If something was going on and I couldn't call on a Sunday, it would be the next day. So she didn't get worried that I didn't call every day, because that's the other thing that you create is when you call your loved ones every single day and you have to miss a day because the lines got broke, the sandstorm took out the commo, whatever the situation was. Now you got them worried because you missed a day. And so I think that is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, if you look at, there's so many patrols and like I said, the op tempo can change so much. And then if you set a rhythm with your house and you're going to call and talk to your children every day, that's just not sustainable in the military. Something's going to change. It's just, sometimes that happened in Bosnia when I showed up, right. When we replaced our sister battalion from the for 1st Cavalry Division, these guys are like, we're only going on like 3 patrols a week, and it's pretty chill. And then all of a sudden we started bombing Kosovo and we were going out the wire 6 days a week. Right. And so it was, and I think, you can lull yourself and your family into, oh yeah, no, this is, everything's fine. This is chill. And then, things change. So you can't set those expectations with your family, because once they change, then hysterics happen. And then guess what? As the commander of the family support group is calling me, hey, what's going on? What can we tell everybody? Everybody's freaking out. It's like, oh, great. So you definitely need a strong leader in your family support group.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a tough role. Again, it's not necessarily in the military, but that spouse that takes up that role, man, I feel for them sometimes, because I've dealt with some of these spouses. Like, well, you're going to get a call every hour. I promise you, from that one.
From the dependopotamus that's going to drain the soldier's account. And yep. No, I got you.
Yep. And I've seen it multiple times, and it was just, they not only the account, but they seem to drain their careers too, because they always get in trouble. Something goes wrong, whether it be bad checks or just so many things going on at home that they're not focused, and it affects them at work.
Yeah. And I don't know how, like, I get it when Joe makes the mistake, right? Joe, who, marries the first woman. He's 18 years old for the first time he's away from home. He has money. He meets a woman, they fall in love, and he doesn't really understand how this is going to work. That happens, but you see it happen to NCOs and good officers too, and it destroys their lives. And we're better than that. Like, we've learned from the buddy system. Like, think about it: day 1, basic training, boot camp, whatever. You've got a buddy assigned to you, and then you're responsible for that buddy. And if your buddy is awesome, like, you're golden. But if your buddy's a shitbag, you're gonna get smoked every single day, and the drill sergeant's gonna break you. And so you never want to have if you can choose your buddy, you choose a really good buddy. I mean, throughout your military career, you're going to have, when I was platoon leader, my buddy's my platoon sergeant. When I'm a company commander, my buddy's the first sergeant, right? I'm battalion commander, it's a sergeant major, right? And it keeps going up. And sometimes it's, well, your buddy is really your XO if you're the command, whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is this: you don't always get to choose those buddies, but for your spouse, you get to choose that buddy team. And if it's not working out, run, get out. You don't have to be miserable. And then it's just horrific seeing these soldiers suffer because they made a bad decision. They made a bad choice in their buddy team. And look, the buddy team is lost in the draft, just like the Super Bowl, right? Like if you don't choose the right buddy, your life could be hell. And as much as we want to stay together and they say, hey, the Army issued me everything I needed, including my second wife. The thought is that, the relationships are tough during deployments. And I'll tell you one crazy thing. When I went through my battalion command school, when I was in the reserve component, I was in the same trajectory as my active duty counterpart. So I ran into this lieutenant. We were lieutenants together in Fort Hood, right? We were platoon leaders together. And now he's going to be a battalion commander, and so am I. The difference was, I had 2 deployments. He'd had 8. And obviously when you stay in that long, if you have you really need a strong buddy, that strong spouse to stand with you. Otherwise you're probably better off being alone.
Yeah. I was fortunate in that, my wife and we're still married today, even though we're living in separate areas. I'm taking care of my mom in Missouri and my family and my house and everything's still in Georgia. But, we started dating in 7th grade. So we had a kind of a foundation before I went into the military, So I think that helped a lot. It's helped us a lot afterwards because I became a truck driver, which I was always gone. I was in the special ops community for 10 years, so I was always gone. And at the end of the day, now, the fact that I'm away working in Missouri and taking care of my mom and going home once a year or twice a year, it's kind of more normal for us at that aspect. And I think it's important to have that foundation. When you get married and you bring somebody into the military and you're already used to it, me and my wife was going through that same transition together. She's like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, I don't know, because they told me to. And I think that's important because we both had something to learn at the same time. But when you already know it and you bring somebody else in, you sometimes forget that. And that creates that rift because they don't understand it and you're used to deploying or being gone or whatever. It's, just another day for you. It creates a lot. And I think after 9/11, that really hit home with a lot of people,
Yeah. No, it's a tough thing to understand. And I think you have to make that investment up front, invest in that relationship capital, right? Hey, if you're going to be with someone, they need to understand. You need to take the time to explain it to them. And sometimes it's like talking to your soldiers.
Yep.
Tell them what you said, right? Tell them what you're going to say. Tell them what you said, right? And then don't tell. Show them everything. Hey, I'm going to show you my calendar. I'm going to show you the training cycle. And back then we had the red cycle. You probably remember. Yep. And it's like, hey, this is when I'm going to be home. This is when I'm going to be deployed. This is when, and really showing, that person, this is what we're getting into. And if you're fine with it, and look, it can be great. It can be, hey, you're gone. And then when you come back, you really appreciate that time together. If you do it right.
Yep. He was talking about, even as PLs, when we was in Bosnia, I had a PL that made a bad decision, a career-ending bad decision. You remember when you was over there, you had interpreters, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, he got one pregnant.
Well, yeah, that you want to establish good relationships with your interpreters, but not that good. So yeah. Well, and you know what? To be fair, that doesn't surprise me. Based on what we there were a lot of female interpreters, especially for us. They were the only females on base, so it doesn't surprise me. And many of them came from the local region, which of course was in poverty. And it's just like the new lieutenant with the the new BMW, right? It's like, hey, this guy's just throwing his money everywhere, and that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I always wondered, I never knew what happened because that happened real early in our deployment. And so by the time we got back, they sent him straight to Germany, whoop, back you go. And because that's where we were based out of, was Germany. And by the time we got back, he wasn't even in, I don't even know if they chaptered him or if they PCS'd him. I don't know what they did, but I always kind of wondered if, he brought her over and created a happy ever after life, or if it was just, well, for the next 18 years, I'm going to be sending my money overseas.
Well,
I didn't know.
well, that was the misunderstanding about General Order Number 1 was, because there were married couples over there. There were couples that were together, and people said, oh, well, I'm not sure they can't have sex, and we're going to, well, that's not what General Order Number 1 says. You can't have sex with the third country nationals or the locals, but, as long as it's not a fraternization issue, it wasn't prohibited. But unfortunately, those types of things happened, and we expect more from our officers. Like I said, you saw those things happen later with all the deployments, but I mean, in Bosnia, you would think, those were 6-month deployments, but once again, the young lieutenant, look, there's a reason why they treat us like we're as useless as wet toilet paper. Hey, we're dumb. We may be book smart. Maybe we have a degree, but we don't have we lack life experience, right? And we lack military experience, but more importantly, we lack life experience. Now we're in charge of a platoon. Like, really? I mean, that's the whole, for me, feeling so unprepared. And keep in mind, I mean, I showed up for my first platoon. I was, I'd been to IOBC, Ranger qualified, and I still felt like, man, like I'm letting these guys down. Most of my guys were Desert Storm veterans, and I'm looking around going like, who am I to lead these heroes? Especially when we're going to Bosnia, and they're all like, yeah, man, like no problem. I'm not going. What if I lead us into a minefield that all that UXO, because they scared us to death. Like if you go off the roads, you will blow up, right? I mean, it was, so I was worried, like I'm gonna get us lost, I'm gonna get us blown up, and it wasn't so much I was worried for myself, but I didn't want to let the team down, or more importantly, I didn't want to get us lost, and then they make fun of me for the next, 6 months.
Yeah, but that's, there's two different types. There's the kind that listen to their staff sergeant, company commanders, first sergeants, just like you talked about before. That's part of our job as enlisted, is to mentor the officers that are coming in. And I can only remember one lieutenant that would not listen to anything I said, that tried to throw his rank and his power, and eventually shit rolled downhill and it hit him, and he realized real quick, oh, I should listen. But for the most part, most of them came in and they would be asking questions. And so I think that's a big step. But like you said, they're really E4s. I mean, that's really what a lieutenant is. They're about that same age. They came in, they've got experience as far as knowledge, but they got 10 times the amount of responsibility just thrown at them from day one. Here's your platoon, get to know all your guys, good luck. And so I always felt that, when I talked to them, because I understood how hard it would be. I came in as a private. I had 5 years to learn how the Army worked. You got a few months before you're standing in front of people. And just like you said, it is a big deal to us military guys. If we don't look left and right and don't look like those guys next to us, we know we're the ones that are fucked up. And you don't want to be that PL or that company commander in front of his command being fucked up, And so it is a big deal.
And I mean, I came from a military school background, so I knew drill and ceremony, like 22-5. I knew it all, right? So it wasn't like hey, I have no problem standing in front of formation. I could I'll march him, right? Now, don't do that; they'll piss off your NCOs, right? But hey, I knew what to do for drill. I knew how to hold a formation, but it was all the other stuff. The practical leadership stuff that I didn't know. And I found that there were three types of lieutenants, right? There was the one that was like trying to be buddy with everybody, and everybody liked him. Nobody really respected him. The platoon sergeant always had him by the LBV, or the LBE, by making sure that, hey, let me pull that lieutenant back. Let's not let them screw up the mission. So you had those lieutenants, the ones that just love to be liked. Hey, they go out and get drunk with the soldiers. They're good.
Have you ever wondered how you can help out the show? Well, that is very simple. You can help us out by going to www.twodrunkdudesinAgunroom.com. That is www.twodrunkdudesinAgunroom.com. There's many ways you can help us by listening to the show, supporting the show, liking, sharing, and everything else that comes along with social media. But one of our biggest goals is to help build the nonprofit Heroes Voice Media Foundation. This is a foundation that has decided to start celebrating courage and amplifying heroes. Find your voice with
would do anything, give you the shirt off their back, but they just weren't leaders because they wanted to be liked too much.
Yep.
Then there were the guys that, just demanded respect. And these are the guys you couldn't tell them anything, but you know what? They did get that respect because they would go by the book with everything. Everything was by the book. And that was the only way they could survive because they were so hardcore. And like I said, there's a fine line between hardcore and stupidity, and they usually crossed over it. But the team would respect them because they would punish them or hold them accountable if they didn't follow the rules. And so these guys were just like the sticklers. These guys, the total nerds, right? Who were just like deep in the regs and it almost played gotcha with their NCOs, which they were respected because they were feared or because people knew that they were technically and tactically proficient, but they weren't, they just lacked the charisma. And then there were those that were kind of, the third type of lieutenant was the ones that were kind of in between. These were the guys that wanted to be both respected and liked. And those were the most successful lieutenants because those were the ones that could actually lead because people followed them because they wanted to, not because they felt that they had to because of their rank, because the lieutenant would hold them accountable or turn them in or whatever lieutenants do. But they were led because they were successful leaders because people wanted to follow them. They were genuinely liked. And I think if you can be both liked and respected, that's how you win the leadership game.
Yep. And the big difference between those two that you just talked about is one truly knows his soldiers and the other one will never get that opportunity because they're so afraid to let their guard down, and actually let somebody understands them. And that becomes extremely important, especially when you're talking about suicide, because if you don't catch those early warning signs, if you don't see when somebody's changing and they're not their self no more, you may catch it too late. And that guy that doesn't truly know his hobbies of his soldiers and whose uniform always looks good and whose don't, and things going on in their marital life, if you're not talking about those things, you're never going to get to know them. And that guy that wants to be liked, he lets himself get in there just enough to know the details, but not to the point where we're going out drinking and having everything. That's where that professional fear kind of kicks in. That's why I think those guys are so much more successful. It's knowing the people they're leading.
Yeah, and you'll never have that closeness in the civilian world. I've tried. This is why I hire veterans, because I try to recreate it. But when you mix in civilians, the difference is like you can't trash talk. You can't rib each other the same way. When we have a comrade with a problem, right? It's like you got a soldier with a problem. What's the first way we deal with it? Usually humor. We make fun of them, right? And then eventually we have a heart to heart. But if we can laugh about it, we can talk about it. Yep. And if you know your soldiers well, I mean, you can joke about everything from their girlfriends to their moms to anything that is off limits in the corporate world was never off limits in the military. And it wasn't because we were like bad, mean, rude people. It was because we cared, because we would have the banter. We would just love to, just talk back and forth because we weren't afraid to be vulnerable. It was like, if you're vulnerable, I'm going to make fun of you. Then I'm going to make fun of you. But we all respected each other because see, warriors respect warriors. And you're not going to find a lot of warriors out in the civilian world. You're going to find a bunch of weak people who are going to be offended. And their parents didn't have the common sense to teach them that if you're offended, that's really, on you. Like that's your perception of what's going on. And you allowed someone to offend you just as you allow someone to make you feel inferior. And so, in the veteran world, that really wasn't an issue with a tight knit group of soldiers. You just, hey, we were tight and we all made mistakes, and I hated to make mistakes because I knew they were going to make fun of me. And and then the comments today in the workforce are absolutely inappropriate and should not happen. But back then it was, you would just give everybody trash about everything, and we got along, and there was just this deep connection. Where, if someone was talking trash to you, it was because they liked you.
Yeah. If you weren't liked, they completely ignored you. And I'm going to be honest, just that topic right there that you just touched, I struggle with at work. I made friends with one of the employees that was an HR representative. And she's the only person that's ever gave me a gift but it was a tablet that says, on a daily basis, I'm an HR nightmare. And it's because of things that I would say, and just for my general, I'm a straightforward guy. I'm not going to lie to you. and I'm not going to tell you what you just want to know. I'm going to give you the truth, and how you take it, that's up to you. You know, I can't control whether you're mad, sad, happy, or whatever. That's on you. But I'm not going to lie to you and give you false information. And a lot of civilians people, they don't operate in that world. They just they want to please and kiss ass and get to the top. And it's tough because I just don't fit in that category.
Well, no, a lot of veterans feel that way, and it's you have to make that shift, and it is like, you know, but it's not that hard, because if you're part of the greatest profession in the history of the world, the United States military, and
Right.
so you have to. It's like, you know, you have to just behave like, you know, hey, you're going in to see the commander or whatever, and so, but there's, you know, there's subtle thing, right? Like don't use mill speak, which means like don't cuss. You know, don't, instead of knife handing, just turn your palm, and it's much more inviting. I learned that instead of, you know, really knife handing somebody and just, you know, turn your palm, instead of, you know, sometimes going after somebody, it's better just to ask questions and don't be, I know, cause we generally, you know, some of us have short fuses, but it's better to actually just ask questions and be curious and not be as like judgmental. And that's tough.
Yeah.
We have to like take a minute and say, okay, like, yes, that's true that if we were on a military base right now and I saw that, it would be like, okay, what the fuck? And and you know what? And the problem would and the problem would be solved. There would be no more discussion. Instead, you know, in the civilian world, instead it's oh, I see there might be an issue here. Could we talk about this, please? And how are you feeling about this? And I want to make sure that I'm getting your perspective. And those things can be helpful in getting people to open up and to explore the problem. But you have to have those open lines of communication and dialogue and trust in the corporate world. But as a veteran, it's very tough to get there, because you're so used to being direct, using whatever you're more vulnerable. So you're using those feelings. You're letting your team see that you're angry, sad, frustrated, and you're not afraid to show those emotions. But if you let those emotions go in the corporate world, you're right, you will be an HR nightmare, and you're going to offend people. You're going to scare people away. They're going to report you. And it's unfortunate, but that's, you know, that you're not with a band of warriors anymore. Right. You are with, you know, some people from various walks of life, and you have to tread lightly. Now, that being said, that this is why your buddies are so important. Your friends are so important, right? Because, you know, we can talk about veteran suicide, and look, we've represented thousands of veterans with PTSD. And I will tell you, in my interactions with veterans, there's no more mission, and I don't have a team. And it's on the mission. It's with the team that you can blow off smoke and really be yourself and say, I show up to work every day. I'm not who I am because I'm in this stifled corporate world. And it's like, well, maybe that's not the place for you. Maybe you should own your own business, be an entrepreneur, do something different. But if you feel more alone when you're with your team, you're not with the right team.
Right.
And I think that a lot of veterans struggle with that. And if you know, post-traumatic stress, it gets worse when you feel isolated and alone in groups. It's like, you know, wait a minute, I should feel like I'm part of this, but I'm not. I'm different, and they don't get me. And I tell somebody how I feel, and it's not acceptable here. Well, why is that? It's the way I'm saying it. And so now you want me to change? You know, it's like, wait a minute. I raised my hand. I supported and defend the Constitution. You want me to change? Right. And so, you know, I think as veterans, sometimes we have to just look at, I'm not saying, you know, well, I'm not giving any advice here. All I'm saying is I think you become more aware of it, that what we say doesn't resonate, and that, you know, we're all of a sudden you're in a meeting and you say something and it's like, yeah, you feel very uncomfortable because nobody gets you. They're all kind of looking at you like you're weird because you said something that you felt. You didn't try to use corporate speak and dance around it and use big words. You said what you meant, because that's what leaders do. That's what warriors do. But that's not the way the civilian world works. And so we feel very isolated at times.
Yep. No, you are absolutely right. I want to dig a little bit into your law career. So while you were in command, you were in the civilian world working as an attorney, right?
Yes.
Was it for your own business, or were you working for a different firm?
I was working for my father. So my father started the firm. You know, my father was a famous trial lawyer. Like after his book defending the members of the 5th Special Forces in Vietnam. That was a huge case, and he practiced in New York City. Then he came back to the Midwest, and he'd had trials in I think 23 states and multiple countries, and he was just known as the guy, and he was a phenomenal lawyer. So. Growing up, I'm the oldest son, so it only made sense that I would take over the business. But I can tell you that a law practice and a law business are two entirely different things. And my father, tremendous lawyer. I will never be as good of a lawyer as he was. But the business was not run well, and that was just, I think, a mark of the times. Back then, it was, you're a practitioner, and the cases just came in. But as the world has changed, right, with the internet, and so it's not like the best cases don't go to the best lawyers anymore; they go to the best marketers. And so you have to figure out, the landscape has changed. Your the current operating environment is not what it was when he was practicing. So, what I did was I started modernizing things. Now, that being said, my mission has not changed that much. Lawyers take an oath very similar to the one we took when I was commissioned to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Look, we take a very similar oath, and now I just defend the Constitution one client at a time, whether that's one veteran who needs to appeal a decision because the VA is not giving them what they are required to provide under the law. Then that's one client I help, or someone who's been falsely accused of a crime, or someone who's been in a horrible accident and the insurance company is refusing to pay. They're like, wait a minute, I've been paying my insurance premiums my whole life, and now I'm in a horrible accident. And why is my insurance company not helping me? And then the other driver, the truck company's insurance company isn't paying me. Why is this happening? So we get to stand up for those individuals. So I get to support and defend the Constitution one client at a time, but I only get to do that because brave men and women died for us for that specific purpose, that Constitution. So it is sacred to me, and I honor it and I cherish it. And look, I got to defend it as a soldier, but now I'm old, and my best way to do it is just one client at a time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's important, and that's the other thing that I really liked was how you were veteran based, and you brought, veterans in to work with you, and it's still helping veterans, not just the Constitution, but you're taking care of the people that was over there. And let's face it, a lot of times the Constitution isn't so much the problem. It's just getting what is earned, the help that's needed when you come back. It's not always there. The bureaucracy that comes with the red tape, I think, is the bigger problem. It's not so much that they don't want to. I think there's a communication problem between a veteran and how the VA really works. They don't put down the right words. They don't, and it's kind of all red taped,
Well, and it is, and here's the deal. It's a bureaucracy, right? And it's a large bureaucracy. But here's the problem, because my father was doing a lot of veteran work pro bono. This is pre 9/11, and mostly we were representing Vietnam veterans and even World War II veterans. And you wouldn't believe the stories, right? The stories we would hear from the Rangers in World War II, and hearing about like Burma, which it's not even called Burma, it's like Myanmar or something. But anyway, what was going on in the world at the time, and just the grit, the true grit, and the things that these heroes did in Korea and Vietnam, and even in Desert Storm. I got to hear all these stories, right? And it was just it was amazing. But the problem was this: the problem was the VA was not robust enough to serve those heroes. And then what happened was 9/11 hits. Now, no one knew that we'd be in this, multiple wars. We got, OIF, OEF. So we're in Iraq, we're in Afghanistan, and things are going on for 2 decades, right? Yeah. And no one expected that we would still be at war for 2 decades, right? And so the military, obviously the money is there, but were we funding the VA adequately? Was the VA prepared for all these soldiers? And I know you probably came back and there was the OIF, OEF transition clinic, but talking to some of the team members, I know people who work for the VA who had mandatory overtime they had to work, all the time to get caught up. So it wasn't like they were not trying to serve. But then the other issue was everything was paper, right? And they wanted to go paperless. And there's some, anytime you're in a large organization, movement is slow. And so there's just it was a perfect storm where a lot of veterans didn't get the services, and still don't get the services or the compensation that they earn, that we, the American people, promised them, because we just didn't forecast the amount of veterans we were going to have. And look, Nobody could have, right? We didn't know that we were going to have up armored Humvees and MRAPs and the IBA and the ACH and all these great, I think ACH is now obsolete. But anyway, the point is like all this great equipment that was saving lives, but these veterans were now returning with traumatic brain injuries and PTSD and other things that we didn't really, I think as a government, well, we as a government, I don't want to include myself, right? But I guess, we as a country didn't think through. And so we did not adequately fund the VA. We didn't, there were not enough pieces in place, but in the end of the day, it is still a bureaucracy. There's still red tape. Decisions are made based on someone's interpretation of the Code of Federal Regulations. Or should you be at 10% or should you be at 70%, right? A human is making that decision for now, right? I mean, who knows, AI in the future, whatever. But the point is, there's a lot to it, and the laws can change over time, right? There is the way it works for I'm sure you know this. There's every state and territory has at least one regional office. Some have multiple. And then there's a board. There's an administrative law board, the Board of Veterans Appeals. Then there's a Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. And then there's the Federal Circuit. And then above that is the United States Supreme Court. So there is a court system. The problem is these cases can take years. And we've represented veterans who have become homeless during these times, who have committed suicide during these times, because it becomes so hopeless. And, when a lot of veterans, when I say people, because it's usually the family member, the spouse, and they come to us like, we're tired of fighting. And then we say, hey, let us fight for you. Let us fight alongside you. And it's crazy. Like we've had Vietnam veterans who come back and they're like, well, my DD-214 was screwed up. I never got a DD-215. And they're telling me I didn't serve in Vietnam. Isn't it bad enough that they spat on me? Isn't it bad enough they called me a baby killer? Now they're telling me I didn't even serve in Vietnam. And so I said, hey, man, go raid the attic and let's get a hold of your buddies. Let's get buddy statements together. Let's get the photos. Let's get, and letters home. And so we were able to, put together evidence, but it's like blown away. Like, the veteran's just heartbroken. They're saying I didn't serve in Vietnam. Like, wow.
Yeah. And I think that becomes even more of an issue than his benefits. Now it's not even that you're not going to give me any benefits or take care of me in any way, but now you're telling me I don't even exist. I wasn't that guy that served this country that was sent over there, for whatever reasons, whether you were drafted or volunteered, it doesn't matter. You still were over there. And now they're just telling you don't even exist. You weren't there. You're not who you say you are. Have a good day. So I think that's even worse.
Yeah. Or you're malingering. You don't have PTSD. You're malingering. You don't need to be standing, and it's like, well, you weren't there. And look, I get it. Like I said, I went as an infantry guy, then I was a rep, right? So, I went, there are some individuals that never left the wire, but they saw a lot of death on the inside, which, can be pretty traumatic when you see one of your own.
Well, and this is what I tell people. It comes down to, partly of where you come from, if you came from an upper class family and life was good and there wasn't no divorces or child abuse or anything like going on in your house, and the worst thing that ever happened to you was you got a B- one time, it's not going to take as much to trigger trauma for that person than it would, say, somebody that was coming up in a neighborhood that had shot bullets going off all the time and gangs and stuff like that. They may be able to, and I'm not saying always, but they may be able to handle a little bit more than that next person. Operation Encore is a 501c nonprofit that is helping veterans turn into rock stars every single day. You can learn more about what Operation Encore is doing by going over to their website at www.operationencore.org. That is www.operationencore.org. If you can give them a hand, just click that little donate button or follow all of their social medias and learn exactly what they are doing to change the lives of our veterans every single day. So you can't judge, just because one person's seen severe stuff and has PTSD, now everybody that's seen less than that should not have it. You can't judge that way. It doesn't work that way.
No, that's not the way. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, if there's, and it's crazy, right? Because I've seen this happen with the VA. Oh, well, that was a pre-existing condition. Well, there's a presumption of soundness when you go into the military that, yeah, you know what, the VA had a mental health test before you went in, that you had a physical. And so, oh, well, that trauma has, when you were a child, that caused a mental health issue that was not caused by military service, right? But we know that military service makes it worse. And so if you have a disability that is made worse, a pre-existing condition, but if it is made worse by your military service, you are entitled to compensation, right? Yeah. It's, and it happens all the time. And I recently had a podcast with a law enforcement officer said, hey, I was an Air Force guy. I wasn't, nothing in my military service was traumatic. And they had some traumatic incidents with the police department. And the book's called Relentless Courage. And he goes in there and the police department's blaming the military. And he's like, and I talk to people all over the world, and the police department blames the military blames the police department, and no one wants to take accountability for that person's post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, here's the thing. Who cares? If they experience if they experience that stress while serving our community, let's take care of them. Let's get them treatment. If they need benefits, and by God, let's get them the benefits that they've earned. And it's tough, but it goes even beyond that. We do a lot of, so I run my company like a true battalion. So I have a company commander who runs our VA section. I have a company commander who runs our personal injury section, a company commander who runs our criminal defense section. And what we found with traumatic brain injury is if you have a TBI and you're in a car accident, it can make it several times worse than somebody who's just in a normal fender bender, because that TBI, that initial TBI from military service. And guess what the insurance companies say? Oh, well, this was from the military, right? But no. It happened in the military, but it was made worse by the car accident. And so it's the same logic. It's like, well, if you came from this and you might have had some issues, then we are not responsible. And the answer is we, the people of the United States, are absolutely responsible. You held your hand. You swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I'm not going to turn my back on you. It blows my mind. Oh, well, that's a pre-existing. You grew up and, that must've been from when you were abused as a kid or the gang violence. No, they served. And it blows my mind why we look so hard to find reasons to turn our back on the people who stood up for us.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And, one of the things, so, and this brings me to my next question, but, I was obviously, I had PTSD before I got out, and I didn't realize it. And one of the big things for me was my temper. I was tanking my career as I was getting close to retirement. I literally did not give a fuck anymore. And I got into an argument with the VA rep as I was retiring, out processing, over the fact that I asked him a question, right? My appointment was the next day. All I asked him was, I walked up, he was standing out talking to some other soldiers, just joking. It was early in the morning. And I walked up to him. I said, "Hey, excuse me, sir, I got a question for you." And all I was going to ask is, what do I need to bring tomorrow? And he goes, "Do you got an appointment?" I said, "No, my appointment's tomorrow. I just have a question." He goes, "Well, today's not a walk-in day. You have to have an appointment." And he just turned around and walked off. And I looked at him and said, "Well, you know what? I don't need your fucking money." And I never went to that appointment, and I never filed a VA claim for several years until after I finally seen a civilian therapist and got some help and got my temper a little bit more under control. And then finally I realized how stupid I was. And I went and I started filing it. So that brings me to my question. Why is it so much harder for veterans to get their benefits if they file years later versus right there as they're out processing?
Well, I mean, there's a lot, there could be a lot of reasons. Generally, if you have it in your file, first of all, I think the digitization of the records, we're going to have digital records, so we're not going to lose paper files anymore. You think that worked?
No.
So, I mean, there's still veterans who are telling me, hey, I don't understand why they can't find this. But generally, so right when you leave service, and look, I get it. When I came off active duty, my dad was like, I hurt my shoulder in Ranger School the first time I went through. I had to go through twice to get my tab. But my dad's like, you need to make sure that you get your medical, your physical. But guess what? I couldn't get into the Fort Hood, I couldn't get into a physical, and I was going to hop a flight to Hawaii. So I'm like, screw that. I got less than 30 days of terminal leave left. I'm traveling, man. I don't need a physical. So yeah. So, I mean, and I'm service connected for that shoulder because it got, when I was in Iraq, my IBA, it just kept, irritating and, you've got a full kit and I have a degenerative disc disease now. And a lot of people who rock around a lot get that. And, it just got really bad. And so I finally, when I came back, the reserve component was great about, going through the VA. And I was like, I didn't even want anything to do with it, but they're like, well, what about your shoulder? And, I'm like, could I get an x-ray? And then, whatever. So I took care of it. And that was, that helped. But for a lot of individuals, they're coming back. You come off active duty and like, hey, you don't want a physical. All you want is that DD-214 and to be done. And so what happens then is it becomes more difficult over time, because if you were there, if there's any dispute, you can get buddy statements right away, but also your medical records are right there. You usually leave service with, back in my day, when I left, I had a copy of my medical records in hand, right? So if something wasn't transferred to the VA, you got it right there. But also it's, well, when did that disability start? And look, I mean, I hate to say it, but as we get older, the disabilities get worse. Okay. And so if you have it documented from service and you have a current disability when you get out, that's a lot easier than if you have a disability 5, 6, 7 years down the road. And like, well, this could have been caused by a bunch of other things. And it comes back to that chicken and egg PTSD problem. Well, was the PTSD caused from your childhood, or was it caused by something that happened, a traumatic event in service? And so similarly, if you have a problem, okay, let's say, and I don't know, were you airborne? Were you a paratrooper?
I was not. No.
You're a leg. Were you air assault?
No, I was not.
Okay. So, but these are great examples, right? Of, we say air assault, too scared to jump, too lazy to hump, air assault, right? So, but guys that like the paratroopers, it's a great example of they get out and they say, I'm fine. They go through the physical. Meanwhile, all those PLFs, the parachute landing falls, you jack up your ankles, your feet, your hips, and then, yeah. And you've been walking funny, but hey, I'm fine, because guess what? You're in your 20s or 30s and whatever. You don't want to see a doctor. And then what happens is that little problem in your left knee becomes a problem with your left ankle and your left hip. And now you're compensating your right side. And now you got a problem with your right knee and your right hip. And then you claim it. And it's like, well, you had no injuries in service. This must be caused by something else. And the guy, well, I got 50 jumps and, I got videos of me, going foot, ass, head into the, into the drop zone. And but it's very difficult to prove causation. And so in any VA disability claim, the key is that you have to prove that you have a current disability. Okay. It was, and then it was caused by military service, right? So there's this nexus that they're looking for. You can't just say, well, I have a disability, it's current, and I was in the military, right? That's not good enough. There has to be a nexus. There has to be a connection between the disability and the military service. And when I say disability, I also mean disease. Camp Lejeune water, Agent Orange, burn pits, right? There's also all these diseases now associated with that as well. And if you look at what's happened with the burn pits and some of the claims that were unjustly denied, I mean, that's a whole wormhole I don't want to go down, but there's a lot of issues with veterans who were even after the PACT Act, they're still denied. It's crazy. I mean, we burned everything over there. Hell, the whole, I was in Al-Assad, Iraq. The whole place smelled like a burn pit every day. You didn't have to go. You didn't have to go too far to find, where stuff was being burnt. But I mean, it's frustrating because common sense may tell you all this stuff, but you need a doctor a lot of times to give you that diagnosis and to give you that opinion to say that, yes, it is as likely as not that this disability was caused by military service. But then even if you get there, you're still at the mercy of the rating specialist or the it's called the decision review officer is going to look at this and say, well, okay, so we're looking down the Code of Federal Regulations. And once again, the disability rating can be anywhere from 0 to 100%. And so you got hearing loss at 0%. Now, the good news is if you got hearing loss at 0%, your service connected. If it gets worse when you're older, you can file for an increase. But at the time, it doesn't seem like much, right? You're like, well, wait a minute. Like my wife is yelling at me because I always turn to the TV telling me I'm deaf, and I sat there and they told me I failed the hearing exam, right? Remember that you sit there and and you hit the buzzer. Oh, I hated that because did I hear something? Did I not? Whatever. But and then there's also anyway. But the point is, it's not what happened, right? It's what you can prove happened. And this is why lawyers become so important in the veterans disability world. And quite frankly, there was, going back to Civil War, lawyers couldn't represent, or there's a maximum lawyers could charge like $10. Now, most reputable lawyers will work on a contingency basis, which means we don't get paid unless you win, and then the lawyers get a percentage of the back pay. Like I said, that's the way most lawyers work. Because veterans that need, they can't afford a lawyer. But the sad thing is, a lot of times you get a lawyer involved, and we see these cases, and the veterans have been suffering for 3, 4, 5 years doing it on their own. And then they bring in the lawyer, and a good lawyer can help them, put together an argument, put together the evidence, and get there. Because it's not just, if I just submit a medical exam, then I'm good, right? No, there's still probably a legal argument that needs to be made as well, depending on the factual basis or the circumstances. But it's really important that you have the evidence that you have a disability and that it happened in service. And if you don't have both of those, and you can't show the connection between the disability and the military service, you got a problem. And where are you going to get that? From a doctor. And so who do veterans not like to see? Our doctors, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's just, studies show men in general don't like to call doctors. It's like, why do I want to go to a doctor? Why do I want to sit in a waiting room and then talk to somebody? And one of the concerns is that sometimes one of our arguments is that the VA medical exam was inadequate. This veteran, drove an hour to the VA hospital and waited there for 2 hours to see, a doctor or a specialist who talked to him for 10 minutes. Right. And they say, and that was it. And they didn't look at my leg, or they didn't, whatever. And so some of the complaints that we hear from veterans is like, I'm not getting an adequate examination. They're not even looking at me. And so there's a lot of frustration out there. But that doesn't look, I have a brother who's an Air Force veteran, who's a VA doctor. There are a lot of great VA doctors. It's just, the system is stressed. We were not prepared for it. We didn't do our planning. We didn't think through what prolonged war would do to the VA system.
Yeah, no, you are absolutely right. And I've said it before, the PTSD issue, I think, is going to get worse, because now we've got different generations. The first half was one type of generation with a different personality than the second half. And I don't think we've fully seen the PTSD issues that they're going to have, because there's definitely that disconnect. And I think the nonprofit world is going to have to play a big part in helping with that as well. Well, why don't you go ahead and I bring you up and you tell everybody, a little bit about your podcast, where they can find it, your services. And I know I've had your website going down there, but if there's any other place that we can bring them. And then I'd like to end on one thing. If you could tell any veteran that is either just got out or getting out, what is the most important thing that they need to do?
Okay, great. So that's a lot of stuff. So I'll start with the first one. So my podcast is called Veteran Led. It's on all the social channels. The premise is this: I believe that everything I learned as a new lieutenant, or you learned during your first enlistment, how to lead a company, your community. It was all the basic skills that helped me build my team and my company. And I learned all this stuff. It helped me hire veterans, but we grew rapidly. We grew into a great organization. And it helps that like 30% of our team is veterans. And I wish it could be 100%. But what I really learned was that, what you need to do. Leadership. Leadership is a universal skill that in the military has been iterated for thousands of years, and it's been perfected by the United States military. Leadership. You know how to lead others. You know how to build teams. You know how to take care of your brothers and sisters. You have such an advantage over your civilian counterparts. Don't let that go to waste. If you want to run a nonprofit, if you want to go work in a community organization, great, but be a leader. Go out and be a hero to somebody, because we don't like to call ourselves heroes, but you know what? That family member that looks up to you, you're a hero to them. They know what you did. They know you served, and they're grateful. And you it's just like being in uniform. They know who the veterans are. And they look up to you, and you have something to give back. And guess what, man? That oath didn't expire with the DD-214. So please continue to give back. Our country is depending on you, because we need real leaders now more than ever. So that's what Veteran Led is about. And I talk about all my experiences, my failures, things I did well, the leadership lessons I learned from great people. It's been interesting to go back and re-examine that stuff. But that's what I stick by, is that veterans know how to lead. If you've served, whether it was 1 year or 30 years, you know how to lead. As far as Barry Law, PTSDlawyers.com is in post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSDlawyers.com, Barry Law, BERRYLAW. Yeah, you can, like I said, go to our website. There's a lot of great information. We have a YouTube channel as well. But anyway, yeah, happy to help our fellow veterans. And like I said, you get back so much more than you give when it's the veteran community. I mean, the relationships, the camaraderie, and more importantly, the confidence and the opportunities. Look, I'll just tell you one great program I got into through Bunker Labs. They're a veteran nonprofit. Through JP Morgan Chase, there's something called CEO Circle, where like veterans who run companies can go there and get free training and be part of a group of other veteran leaders. So there's a lot out there if you just look for it, but no one's going to come look for you. You got to go out there, look for it, and take it. Be that veteran that goes out and doesn't sit and wait for something, but be the veteran that makes something happen. Be like your first sergeant.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you were 100% right. Since I have gotten involved in the nonprofit world, man, it has helped me in therapy myself, because just the feeling of giving back and being a part of that team again helps. So yeah, you are 100% right. Well, John, I appreciate you coming on, man. If you don't mind, I'll throw you back in the green room and I'll throw up the exit video and then we'll chat a little bit after.
Awesome. It's been an honor. Thanks so much for having me. And thank you for all that you do by leading by example and showing veterans that, hey, man, the purpose is all there and you're doing exactly what we expect of our veterans.
I appreciate you coming on. Thank you. All right, man. So, my main focus was to let everybody know, the veteran community out there, we all have the same problems. Maybe a little bit different. The details might be a little bit different, but we all have the same issues, where we came from and trying to adapt in the civilian world and dealing with the VA and dealing with our health and everything else. What I can tell you is it doesn't get any better. I waited several years to file my VA claim, and I've spent the years trying to make that right and get back to where I need to be. And my health is still going downhill. So it doesn't get easier as the years go on. So reach out if you need some help. Mentally or physically, go see it, get some help. If you need some legal help, reach out to an attorney like Mr. Barry and have them help you. Take a little bit of that mental stress off you and reach out to them and just have that conversation. Maybe there's something that you didn't know or a way that they can help you that you didn't think of. All right. I hope all of y'all have a great day. Remember, don't let the day kick your ass. Kick the day's ass. Y'all take care. Be safe, and we will see you next week.